It was late in the evening when my neighbor knocked on my door, her face pale under the porch light. She held out her phone like it was something poisonous. "I think you should see this," she whispered. On the screen glowed a Facebook post. My name sat bold at the top, followed by words I never imagined reading about myself. "She forgets where she is half the time. She yells at the kids. She even hit me once when I tried to help." My stomach dropped. The picture attached was of me in my garden, cropped close so the dirt on my hands looked like something shameful. The words blurred as my eyes filled. My daughter-in-law had written them. Her profile picture was right there, her smiling face beside the venom. I sank into the chair by the door, my breath shallow. My neighbor shifted awkwardly. "It's spreading fast. People are commenting. Some from church. I thought you should know before tomorrow's service." With trembling fingers, I scrolled. Comment after comment, each one like a stone. "So sad we didn't realize." "She should get help." "Praying for your family." Every line cut deeper. These weren't strangers. These were people who had sung hymns beside me, who had shared potlucks and prayers. And now, with one post, they looked at me differently. I touched the screen, tracing the photo. That was my garden, the one I had tended for 30 years. To me, it was soil, growth, and life. To them, it was now proof of a lie. A sharp knock jolted me, the door still open, my neighbor watching. "I'll print it," she said firmly. "Don't delete anything." "You'll need this." Her words felt foreign. Need this. Proof. Proof of my own life. My own truth. I looked back at the glowing screen, my heart hammering. This wasn't a misunderstanding whispered in a kitchen. This was public. Permanent. My dignity had been nailed to a wall for everyone to see. And tomorrow I would have to walk into church knowing every eye had already read her lies. The next morning, sunlight spilled across my kitchen table, catching the rim of my coffee cup. The house smelled of toast and the faint lavender cleaner I used the night before. From the outside, everything looked ordinary, just another Sunday morning. But my stomach churned, heavy with the knowledge of what waited beyond these walls. For years, my life had followed a rhythm I cherished. Up early, tending the garden, a quick breakfast, then walking down Oak Street with my Bible tucked under my arm. At church, I always sat in the second pew from the front, close enough to hear the choir's harmonies, but far enough to watch the whole congregation. After service, we'd gather in the fellowship hall, potlucks with casseroles lined up, children running between tables, laughter rolling through the room like music. It hadn't always been easy. When my husband died, that church carried me. Meals appeared on my doorstep, prayers wrapped around me like a blanket. On the hardest nights, Pastor Lee would stop by, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, reminding me I wasn't alone. I held on to those memories as armor while I buttoned my cardigan. But even as I dressed, I remembered the post, the lies still glowing on screens across town. Would the same people who once hugged me now pull away? I stepped into the hallway, where a family photograph hung, my son on his wedding day, his bride smiling in lace and pearls. I had welcomed her with open arms, calling her daughter from the start. I bought the dress she wore for the rehearsal dinner, stitched the hem myself. She had squeezed my hand that night and whispered, "Thank you for treating me like family." Now those words rang hollow. As I reached for my purse, I noticed something unusual. My daughter-in-law's handwriting on a note left on the counter. "Don't forget to take your medicine. We'll pick you up for church." It should have been thoughtful. Instead, it felt like a jab, a subtle reminder of the very lie she had told the world, that I was forgetful, incapable. The ride to church was quiet. My son drove, eyes fixed on the road. My daughter-in-law sat in the back seat with her phone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. I caught my reflection in the window, calm on the outside, storm raging beneath. When we arrived, I felt the shift instantly. Friends who once waved warmly now paused, their smiles thin, their eyes sliding away too quickly. In the fellowship hall, conversations hushed as I passed. A woman I had shared recipes with for years avoided my gaze, turning to stir her coffee. I forced a smile, greeting them as usual, but the weight of silence pressed down harder than words. After service, Pastor Lee approached me at the door, his brow furrowed, his tone gentle but probing. "Are you all right?" "There are concerns going around." I lifted my chin. "I'm as I've always been, Pastor." "The truth hasn't changed." He searched my face, then nodded slowly. "Remember, the truth finds its way. Sometimes through fire, but it does find its way." I walked home that day with his words echoing in my ears, but inside I could still feel the eyes of the congregation, sharp and uncertain. The place that once wrapped me in belonging now felt like a glass box, and I was on display. At home, I opened my Bible to where a bookmark rested, Psalm 31. "You saw my affliction. You knew the anguish of my soul." I whispered the verse aloud, pressing my palm against the page. Outside, the garden bloomed as it always had, bright marigolds, green beans climbing the trellis. The world went on, but I knew, in the quiet of that house, my dignity was under siege, and the battle was only beginning. The following week felt like walking through fog, familiar streets, unfamiliar stairs. At the grocery store, Mrs. Carter from choir paused in front of the produce aisle, then turned her cart away without a word. At the post office, a clerk who used to chat about her grandchildren barely met my eyes. The rumors were spreading, and I could feel them pressing against my skin like a damp cloth. My daughter-in-law's words weren't just online anymore. They had seeped into whispers, into sideways glances, into silence heavy enough to choke. One afternoon, I stopped by my son's house. He had promised to help me with the air filter in my hallway. The moment I stepped in, I saw her phone lying on the counter, screen glowing with an open group chat. My heart hammered. I could make out my name in bold letters before the screen dimmed. I moved closer, pretending to set my purse down. Just as I reached out, the door to the laundry room swung open. My daughter-in-law appeared, basket in her arms. She froze, then smiled too quickly. "Looking for something, Mom?" I snatched my hand back. "Just setting down my bag." Her smile sharpened. "You really should be more careful. Lately you seem distracted." The words stung. Distracted. Forgetful. Lulan. The lies she had planted online were now slipping into her daily tone. My son walked in then, wiping his hands on a rag. "Filter's fixed," he said cheerfully, though he didn't look me in the eye. He glanced between us, sensing the tension, but choosing silence. We sat down for tea, the steam curling between us. She poured my cup and said lightly, "You know, Mom, maybe social media isn't so bad. It helps people understand what families go through. Sometimes honesty is hard, but necessary." I stared at her, the china cup trembling in my hand. "Honesty?" She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Yes, people need to know the truth, even if it's uncomfortable." Her words were daggers wrapped in lace. When I returned home, I emptied my purse onto the kitchen table. A small slip of paper fluttered out, a receipt she must have accidentally dropped inside. My eyes narrowed. It was from the print shop downtown. At the bottom, the line read, 50 copies, full color, community board flyers. My breath caught. Flyers. She wasn't content with just a Facebook post. She had printed copies. My humiliation was about to be pinned to corkboards across town. I pressed the paper flat under my palm, my heart thudding. This wasn't a rumor anymore. This was a campaign. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my front door. Inside were several sheets of paper, color printouts of the very post I had seen on my neighbor's phone. Across the top, my daughter-in-law's profile picture glared at me, her smile frozen above lines of poison. The envelope wasn't sealed. On the back was a note scrawled in hurried ink. "I thought you should know these are up at the library and the market bulletin board. M.W. Mrs. Wilson." My faithful neighbor had pulled them down before too many eyes could linger, but even she couldn't stop the spread completely. I laid the pages out on the kitchen table. The lies leapt at me. "She screams at the children. She wanders the street at night. We can't leave her alone for fear she'll hurt herself. Each line was a dagger aimed at my dignity. I picked up the phone with trembling hands and called Mrs. Wilson. "Where else?" I asked. "Community center," she replied softly. "I tore down 2, but others, I don't know." Her voice faltered. "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault," I said, though my throat burned. That evening, my son dropped by with my granddaughter in tow. She ran ahead of him, clutching a drawing. "Grandma, look! I made you a picture." She held it up proudly, a crayon sketch of me in my garden, flowers tall around me. My eyes stung. "It's beautiful." She plopped onto the couch, swinging her legs. "Mom said you shouldn't be outside so much, though. She said you forget where you are." The words hit me like ice water. Out of the mouths of children, truth leaks unfiltered. My son froze in the doorway, color draining from his face. "Sweetheart," he said quickly, "go wash your hands before dinner." She bounded off, leaving silence behind. When she left the room, he lingered, lips pressed tight. His hand hovered over the folder of papers I had left on the table, but he pulled back quickly, as if touching them would burn. He opened his mouth as though to speak, then shut it again, retreating into silence. I looked at him, the drawing still in my lap. "Is that what she tells her?" He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes avoiding mine. "It's complicated." "No," I said firmly, my voice trembling with fury. "It's simple. She's spreading lies, and you're letting her." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. Finally, he turned away, retreating into the kitchen. When they left, I gathered the papers, the receipt I had found, the innocent drawing from my granddaughter. I spread them on the table like puzzle pieces. Link 1, the original screenshot from my neighbor. Link 2, the printouts pulled from bulletin boards. Link 3, my granddaughter's slip of truth. Together, they formed a chain too heavy to ignore. What would you have done in my place? Confront her that very night or stay silent and wait? I placed them into a folder, my fingers steady now. For weeks I had felt cornered, humiliated, silenced. But tonight, as the folder clicked shut, resolve settled into my bones. If my daughter-in-law wanted to fight with lies, I would fight with truth. That night, I pulled out the old photo album from the top shelf of my closet. Dust rose in the lamplight as I opened it. There, pressed between the plastic sleeves, was a photograph of my son's wedding day. He stood tall in his black suit, grinning wide, while his bride leaned into him, glowing in lace. I remembered the feel of her hand in mine when I first called her daughter. I had stitched the hem of her dress myself, staying up past midnight to make it perfect. At the rehearsal dinner, she had squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for treating me like family." I traced the photo now, my fingers trembling. How had we come from that day, warmth, promise, family, to this night, where her words dripped poison across every screen in town? I sat in silence, the weight of the contrast pressing on my chest. For weeks I had burned with anger, but in that moment another feeling crept in. Sorrow. Because somewhere inside her venom was a young woman I once welcomed as my own child. The next afternoon, Pastor Lee stopped by. He found me on the porch, the folder of proof beside me. He sat down quietly, the wood creaking under his weight. "I hear the storm is growing," he said gently. "It is," I whispered. I opened the folder and showed him the papers, the screenshots, the flyers, the crayon drawing. His eyes moved slowly, his face grave. After a long silence, he said, "You have truth on your side." But truth fights best when spoken calmly. Not in rage, I stared out at the garden, the marigolds glowing in the sun. "She took my dignity," I said, my voice breaking. "She tried," he corrected softly, "but dignity cannot be stolen." Only surrendered, his words sank deep. I thought of my daughter-in-law's sharp smile, her quick fingers tapping lies into a phone. Was it only malice, or was it fear? Fear of not being enough, fear of losing control, fear of always standing in my shadow? I closed the folder, pressing my palm against the cardboard. "Then I won't surrender." The pastor nodded. And when the time comes, let the truth speak louder than anger. That's when people listen. That evening, I returned to the mantel and placed the wedding photo beside my husband's. 2 promises stared back at me, one kept, one broken. I stood in the quiet, letting both truths live in the same space. Tell me, how long does a promise made on a wedding day truly last? For the first time, I didn't feel only rage. I felt the ache of betrayal braided with something harder to name, a flicker of pity, almost for the woman who had once begged to be treated like family. And in that ache, I found resolve. The next battle would not be fought in whispers or posts. It would be fought in the open. By the end of the week, it was no longer just a post on Facebook. It was in the air, in the glances, in the way conversations paused when I walked into a room. At the grocery store, 2 women whispered near the bread aisle. I caught my name, followed by the word unstable. When I turned, they quickly busied themselves with the shelves, their faces flushed. Later that day, at the salon, I overheard 2 neighbors under the hair dryers. One leaned close to the other and muttered, "Her daughter-in-law says she wanders the street at night. It's a miracle she hasn't fallen yet." They clucked their tongues, pity painted over poison. That Sunday, the church foyer felt like stepping into cold water. The choir still warmed up, the smell of coffee still floated from the fellowship hall, but the air was thick with something unspoken. Mrs. Wilson squeezed my arm as we walked in together. "Hold your head high," she murmured. "They can only take your dignity if you give it." We slid into our usual pew. Around us, friends who once waved now whispered behind bulletins. The lies had sunk deep roots. After the service, Pastor Lee approached, his voice gentle. The elders would like a word. Just to clear the air in the meeting room, 3 elders sat at a long table. Their expressions were kind but cautious. One cleared his throat. "We've had concerns raised. About your health, about your memory. It may be wise, for your sake and the church's peace, if you took a short break from duties." The word stung more than the post itself. To be asked to step aside from the one place that had carried me through grief, it was a wound I hadn't expected. If your church elders asked you to step down based on rumors, would you walk away quietly or fight for your place? I straightened in my chair. My health is fine. My mind is sound. The only thing unsteady here are the lies being spread. Pastor Lee placed a calming hand on the table. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "this is an opportunity for truth to surface. We could invite your family to speak alongside you. A mediation, not a punishment." It sounded like fairness, but I heard the undertone. Suspicion had already tilted the scales. That evening, Mrs. Wilson came by carrying a flash drive. "A friend in the tech group saved the post before it was deleted," she explained. "Every comment, every share. It's all here." She held it out like a weapon wrapped in plastic. I took it with trembling hands. Proof was gathering like storm clouds. Still, the gossip spread. At the salon, I overheard someone muttering, "It's sad, really. Maybe the daughter-in-law's just trying to protect her." At the pharmacy, the clerk offered unsolicited advice about senior homes. The lies had become my shadow, following me everywhere. As she bagged my prescription, she lowered her voice. "Your daughter-in-law asked me to remind you about refills. Said sometimes you forget." My heart clenched. Even here, in the quiet exchange of medicine and trust, her lies had already walked ahead of me. One night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the flash drive beside me, the wedding photo staring from the mantel. The house felt heavy with silence. Then from outside, children's laughter floated through the window. I looked out and saw my granddaughter on the sidewalk, chalk in hand, drawing flowers. She looked up, waved, and shouted, "Hi, Grandma!" The innocence in her voice pierced through the fog. I would not be erased. The next day, Pastor Lee stopped by again. "The mediation is set," he said. "Next Sunday, after service. You, your son, your daughter-in-law, and the elders." He hesitated, his eyes steady on mine. "It will be hard, but truth has to be spoken aloud." I nodded, my hands gripping the chair arms. Fear twisted in my stomach, but beneath it pulsed resolve. The gossip had dragged me into shadows. Next week, I would step into the light. The fellowship hall was fuller than I had ever seen it. Rows of folding chairs lined the walls, the smell of coffee and old hymnals mixing in the air. People sat stiffly, their voices hushed, waiting. Pastor Lee stood at the front, his Bible resting on the lectern. "We are gathered," he said evenly, "not to gossip, not to condemn, but to seek truth in the light." My son sat to the right, his shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. Beside him, my daughter-in-law held her phone in her lap like a shield. She wore a practiced smile, but her foot tapped nervously against the tile. I sat opposite them, the folder on my lap. Inside were the screenshots, the flyers, the flash drive, proof. My hands shook, but I felt Mrs. Wilson's presence beside me, steady as a rock. The first elder spoke. "We've heard troubling things. For the sake of peace, we need clarity." Pastor Lee nodded to me. "Sister, please." I rose slowly, the folder pressed against my chest. "I have lived in this community for 30 years. You've shared my table, my garden, my prayers. Yet in 1 week, lies have undone what decades built." I laid the first sheet on the table, a screenshot of the Facebook post. Gasps rippled through the room as eyes scanned the lines. "She forgets where she is." She screams at the children. She struck me. I swallowed hard. These words came from my daughter-in-law. The elder's brow furrowed. "Are you certain?" Mrs. Wilson stood, her voice firm. "I saw it posted." I saved it. And when it was deleted, I gathered proof. She handed over the flash drive. Murmurs filled the hall. My son suddenly stood, his chair scraping against the tile. His voice cracked. "I knew about the flyers. I saw the drafts. I should have stopped this, but I stayed silent. I thought keeping peace was better than making war, but in the end I betrayed my own mother." His confession rippled through the hall, raw and trembling. My daughter-in-law's smile faltered. She straightened, her voice quick, sharp. "I only meant to share my feelings." "She's difficult, she forgets things. I never said she was dangerous." I placed the next piece of proof, a flyer pulled from the library board. My name in bold, my face cropped, the lies printed for strangers to read. "This isn't just feelings," I said quietly. "This is slander." The pastor's gaze shifted to her. "Daughter, did you make these?" Her lips parted, closed, then opened again. I had them printed, but only because no one listens to me. I feel invisible in this family." Her voice cracked, anger and hurt colliding. "She's always the center." The saint. I was tired of being second place. The confession dropped into the room like a stone. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. My son's head snapped up, his face pale. You did this?" She turned on him, tears brimming. "You never defended me. You always ran to her. I wanted someone to see me, to hear me." Her words were desperate, raw, not just malice, fear of being unseen. I felt the sting of tears. "You wanted to be seen," I said softly, "and so you erased me." The pastor stepped forward, his voice steady. "Truth has spoken. The lies are laid bare. This community knows now who is being slandered and who has done the slandering." The elders nodded. One spoke firmly. "These accusations are false." Sister's dignity remains a ripple of voices swept through the room, relief, shame, sympathy. Some turned toward me with tears in their eyes. Others looked at my daughter-in-law, their faces etched with disappointment. My son buried his face in his hands. My daughter-in-law sat rigid, her confession hanging in the air like smoke. I stood, the folder still open, papers scattered across the table. I never wanted a battle. I only wanted the truth. My dignity is mine to keep, and today it is safe again." The congregation rose slowly, applause breaking the silence. Not loud, not triumphant, steady like rain on a roof. My daughter-in-law wept quietly, her shoulders shaking. She whispered something I barely caught. I just wanted to matter. The human crack was there, small but undeniable. Pastor Lee closed his Bible gently. "Then let this be the end of lies." And the beginning, perhaps, of healing. The gavel of the judge had been replaced by the voices of a congregation, and in that hall, my dignity was restored. When the meeting ended, the hall didn't empty right away. People lingered, their voices softer now, their eyes no longer sharp with suspicion. A few crossed the room to take my hand. "I'm sorry," whispered Mrs. Carter, the same woman who had turned her cart away from me at the market. I believed the post. I shouldn't have. Others nodded, murmuring words of apology, some with tears. The sting of their doubt still hurt, but their repentance settled into me like balm. Pastor Lee returned to the lectern. He lifted his Bible, then set it aside. In its place, he held out a small leather-bound hymnal, worn at the edges. "This belonged to your husband," he said gently. "He left it here years ago. We kept it in the choir loft. It feels right to return it now. Dignity and truth are not just words. They live in what we pass." On my throat tightened as I took the book, the pages soft under my fingertips. A symbolic gesture, as though the church itself was placing dignity back into my hands. Mrs. Wilson, steady as always, slipped her arm through mine. "You see," she whispered, "the truth stood. You stood." In the days that followed, the shift was clear. At the market, smiles returned. At the post office, the clerk asked about my garden again. The fellowship hall, once thick with whispers, now buzzed with warmth. But the damage lingered in shadows. My son came by one evening, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Mom," he said, eyes downcast, "I don't know how to make this right." I should have stopped her. I should have defended you. I touched his arm. "You're my son." "That hasn't changed, but trust takes time to rebuild." He nodded, tears welling, then left without another word. My daughter-in-law didn't return to church. Some said she was too ashamed, others that she was angry. I only knew the silence she left behind. Yet one evening, as I sat on the porch, my granddaughter skipped up the steps. She climbed into my lap with a picture book. "Mommy says we won't come here for a while," she whispered, "but I told her I want to see you." Her small arms wrapped around my neck, and for a moment the ache of betrayal eased. Legacy was not in posts or flyers. It was in this child's voice, innocent and unshaken. At the next service, Pastor Lee spoke to the congregation. "This house of worship is only as strong as the dignity we guard in each other. Let this be a lesson, not of shame, but of the power of truth." The congregation rose in unison, their voices carrying a hymn that filled every corner of the hall. I sang too, my voice trembling but steady, the hymnal from my husband clutched in my hand. Relief washed through me. Not triumph, not revenge, just the quiet strength of belonging again. As the final note faded, I realized something. I had not fought alone. Community, faith, and a handful of steady allies had carried me when family faltered. And though my name had been dragged through mud, it was now lifted again, not spotless, but resilient. I left the hall with Mrs. Wilson at my side, the hymnal pressed against my heart. The night air was cool, the stars bright above. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without fear. The house is quiet again, the hymnal resting on the mantel beside my husband's photograph. I run my hand over its worn cover, remembering the years his voice carried through the choir loft. Tonight, it feels like his presence has returned, not through song, but through the strength of truth reclaimed. Yet even in victory, my heart is heavy. My son's eyes, filled with shame, linger in my memory. My daughter-in-law's broken words, "I just wanted to matter," still echo. Betrayal does not vanish with one apology, nor does trust repair overnight. I step onto the porch as dusk settles. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of my marigolds. On the walkway below, chalk drawings brighten the concrete. Flowers, suns, a small house with smoke curling from its chimney, my granddaughter's work. She looked up at me as she finished earlier today and whispered, "Grandma, now everyone believes you." Her words had been simple, childlike, but they carried a weight no sermon could match. Once I believed dignity came from what people thought of me. Now I know it comes from refusing to surrender who I am, even when those closest to me try to erase it. I sit in my porch chair, the hymnal in my lap, listening to the cicadas hum. Tomorrow, whispers may rise again. Perhaps forgiveness will take root. Perhaps not. That choice lies ahead. But tonight, I rest in the quiet knowledge that truth has been spoken aloud and my dignity remains intact. I look up at the sky, the first stars flickering into view. What makes a family whole? I whisper. Blood alone, or the courage to guard each other's truth? The question hangs in the air, carried on the night breeze, waiting for each heart to answer.